During Prime Minister's questions yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer announced a partial U-turn over the government's controversial winter fuel cuts.
I recognise that people are still feeling the pressure of the cost of living crisis, including pensioners. And as the economy improves, we want to make sure people feel those improvements in their days as their lives go forward. And that is why we want to ensure that as we go forward, more pensioners are eligible for winter fuel payments. As you would expect, Mr. Speaker, we will only make decisions we can afford. That is why we will look at that as part of a fiscal event.
Well, Number 10 haven't yet confirmed if the changes would be in place by this winter. So what do you think, Mariella? There are some people who are asking for him to apologise for doing this in the first place. Do you think he should?
Well, I think we get so hung up on actually the story, we don't actually dig into the detail. And the good news is that clearly that government policy that was so unpopular is going to change in some shape or form, and that is a sort of, you know, constructed way of revealing it. But I think that it's...
So should we give them credit for that, then?
Well, I don't really care about the credit or the no credit. I care about the pensioners, actually, who really need that winter fuel payment getting it. And I think it's a good news story, and I think it's a typical example of how we manage, because we're so cynical these days. We manage to turn everything into a negative. Like last week, there was the new post-Brexit EU government, you know, negotiated deal. And there were loads of brilliant things in there.
Yeah,
you know,
Monday,
I mean,
actually,
even stupid things like not having to get your passport stamped and kids being able to go to Europe and work for 2 years. And all we talked about was fishing.
So you think it's a good news story?
I think it's a good news story, and I think we should see it as such. Thank you. And I, you know, obviously, you know, the devil is in the detail, and there's politicking all around.
The devil really will be in the detail.
But let's hope.
And also, I can see Denise warming up whenever she starts moving around in her seat like that. I know something's happening.
I've got an itch. It's to be honest, as my mother used to say, they say out but their prayers. And I'm sick of it.
That?
They say out but their prayers.
Okay.
Just that expression for they'll say anything.
Yeah.
And basically, I'm just disillusioned by it all and by the whole of politics generally, especially this government. I know that you're its biggest supporter and everything, but anyway...
Really?
No, not UK.
No.
To me... I'll believe it when I see it. Yes, it's nice to hear Keir Starmer's response, but I'll believe it when I see it. He's still saying, we'll do what we can afford to do. But I just find what was going through his head or the government's head when they got into power, we trusted them with that position to help the working person, and cutting winter fuel payments for incomes over £12,000 was the first thing they came out the gate with.
Very odd.
Yeah.
They really meant
so
it.
Unpopular.
They really meant it, and it made them hugely unpopular. And I think since then it's going to be hard to get that trust.
You're right, and I think everyone will say it was generally, people will say it was a misstep. As you say, Denise, it was one of the first things, first big announcements, and it took everybody, you know...
And also, he was going to cut student loans and all of those things. He never did it. He was
I think I'm like you,
stop
Denise.
the two-child benefit cap. Yeah. He never did it. There's 4 million children in poverty. Yeah. I know he's not doing anything about that.
What he will always say is we do what we can afford. We do what we can afford.
But
what he's saying now is that we can relax it because perhaps we can afford now. And I think the big question is going to be, well, where does it go? Does it mean that all old-age pensioners now get it automatically?
That's definitely not going to happen.
Or should we set a threshold? That's the thing. What do you think, Nadia?
Well, first of all, I think we do scrutinise our politicians a lot, and thank God that we do, because I'm afraid I find him extraordinarily pompous in the way that he is, the way he answers questions. Look, I'll have a look at it. As you were saying earlier, Dee, he's going to have a look at it, and we've learned to look around the way they speak and look at their word salads. He's looking at it, so we don't know. But I absolutely believe that it was a really strange thing to come in and do and make everybody dislike you intensely, so they didn't listen to anything else. So I do think that it should be means-tested, but how do we means-test it? Because then that's a whole load of bureaucracy again, and how's that going to be done? Because certainly I wouldn't feel right about taking money for fuel. because I can afford to pay it. So when you lose it, when everybody gets paid, that feels like a real waste, because where else could that go? You know, could you give double to people that are really struggling?
Do you think people should be empowered more and it become... I mean, as you say, you wouldn't take the fuel payment. I wouldn't take the fuel payment. I didn't take child support payments because I felt like, why would I, you know, and so on and so forth. There's a whole discussion.
But maybe what you could do is direct debit it to Age Concern or some other charity. So it's not going back to be spent on something else that you don't know.
Then what do you do if somebody who is, you know, a 72-year-old millionaire says, no, I'm taking it?
Because there's always going to be creeps out there.
Yeah.
You know, there's always going to be...
But
why don't we actually have some faith in humanity? I think someone who goes, I'm going to take it anyway, and he's a millionaire, yeah, he's a creep.
But you might get somebody who says, you know what?
But the thing is, if he reverses his decision on the winter fuel payments, that money will have to come from somewhere else. You know, so you're sort of giving with the one hand and taking with the other. Today...
What he would say is that their government is all about growth. Now, that obviously...
Oh, growth schmoth, I mean, honestly.
Well, there has to... But no, but there has to be growth for us to afford
Angela
what we want
Rayner
to afford.
has said, apparently, it's allegedly, there's lots of stuff that's allegedly, that they are going to start taxing us on savings. So you've paid your taxes, and then your little bit you've got saved, or however amount, there is a possibility you're going to be taxed on that.
This is a leaked memo. This is a leaked memo that we do not know exactly what the details are.
No, we don't.
What we do know is that he has stood up in the Houses of Parliament and indicated that it is likely that there will be either a reversal or a rolling back of this. So, given that you are 67, you would be one of the people who would
She's getting in this many times.
No. But it's true. You would be one of the people who would be entitled to the winter fuel benefit, the payment, if indeed we went back to where it was.
If he started to tax me on savings, I never have any. But never mind. If he started to tax me on savings, then I might say, I'm just hypothetically talking, but I might go, well, I'll have the winter fuel payment. Kay won't have over 60s rail card or a bus pass because she's embarrassed to show it.
How did we get to that? You have been sitting there thinking, I'm going to find an opportunity to say that she's not going to get a bus pass.
Every time you say I'm 67, I'm going to do a Kay.
I know,
don't
that
we
was my
all need
mum's
to
fault.
think about what we want government to do and what we're prepared to pay for? You know, we want, you know, free state education. We want, you know, if possible, for students to go to university without paying. We want a thriving NHS. We want a...
Public
and actually,
services.
there are really horrible, difficult decisions that have to be made in the process of achieving that society. And you know, we have a terrible attitude to tax. I hate it. But I know that it's what makes this a brilliant country to live in.
To pay tax.
And make sure that our children get educated in a way that if you travel to other parts of the world, you see they don't have those opportunities. So maybe we need to just think a little bit about how we always feel resentful.
We have a handle on where it's going.
So where would you set the threshold then? I mean,
I think threshold's really difficult because you get to, you know, OK, let's say it's £20,000, then, you know, you've got...
It's currently around 11,500.
And you earn 20... I know, and 18,000 if you're a couple. I mean, 11,500 is barely livable on, and we know that. So, I mean, the fact that it's set at that is ridiculous. Yeah. But actually, you know, this is all mathematics, isn't it? I'm not the Chancellor, I'm not a budget creator, but I do believe in the principle of old people not freezing to death in the winter, the principle of our children being educated to a decent international standard. And I believe
not so many of our children living under the poverty line.
And not so many of our children. And I believe in feeding our children for breakfast clubs. And all of those things cost money. And I think we have to accept that they cost money and work out what our priorities are and not constantly be looking for the bad news story. Just try and find the positive.
Just because it's your birthday.
No, in defence, the one thing about the Labour government today that I will say, and I haven't read into it a lot, but that probably down to Wes Streeting, I would think, there are going to be allocated mental health teams in most schools. That is going to be, you know, that is going to be fantastic. Yeah. So that is brilliant. So
well, there you go.
There's a tip.
Two good news stories.
Yeah, I love a happy ending.